DiDonna. Ah, hi everybody. It is so good to see everyone here. Welcome to this live event. Okay, anyone guess why I played Holiday by Madonna? We're going to talk about sabbaticals and big time off today, the extended holiday. So welcome. Do me a favor. We like to be very interactive in these conversations. So we're going to start with the chat box. Please hop into the chat box and tell me, where are you in the world? Let's go. Where are you in the world? I am in Northern California in the Redwoods. It is a beautiful day today. So we've got Brooklyn and Santa Fe and Cambridge and Denver, Colorado, Claremont, Miami, Florida is here. Mexico City, hello. NorCal, Silicon Valley today. I always like doing these live events at different times because it kind of helps bring folks in from different areas. So sometimes we get some Aussies and some folks down under this time of day. Roseville, California, Lakewood Ranch. Okay, love it. Now we've got that out of the way, I need to know how many of you are here for the very first time. Give me a yes or a Y in the chat if this is the first thing you have ever done with us, so I can give you a proper welcome. Yes, welcome. So excited to have you here, part of our free wisdom commitment to have these live events to meet folks and connect with thought leaders. How many of you are MEA alumni? You know who you are. Pop in the chat. Alum, yes, whatever you want to say. Nice. Welcome back, alumni. Really good to have alum as of a month ago, Juan. Awesome. That is great. So the purpose of these gatherings is to have a lot of fun, to connect with each other. So the next fun thing that we're going to do, if you are on a computer, is go down to the bottom of your screen and find the react button. React with that heart that's a little bit tilted, and you will see there's all sorts of really fun emojis. It's super entertaining. Go ahead and hit one. Hit your favorite emoji. There we go. Almudena's got some spaceships. Pat's cracking up. Juan's got some party celebration. Love those. Oh my gosh. Annika has a jellyfish. I didn't even know that was on there. So entertaining. Feel free to fire those off as you are having fun. And then below that is the raise your hand button, which we're going to bring on in about a half an hour. About halfway through, we will open it up to questions, comments, insights. See, Steve found a panda. I told you. It's so much fun. We are a midlife wisdom school, but we're still kids at heart. So I am excited to jump in. I am going to bring my guest up here for today. Hello, DJ.
Hey, how are you? Good to see everyone.
It's so good to see you. So everybody, just a little start off here is DJ is going to talk to us about how to rethink taking time away as as something that's important to do throughout our journey, not just as sort of a reward that we have a vacation. In fact, this summer, has anybody been on vacation and you came home needing a vacation from your vacation because you did so much and you're running around and taking care of the kids and then you're exhausted? Funny how we do that. Even when we plan our time off, we actually don't properly rest. So DJ is going to explore how to protect the time and to explore what your energy and your work and your ambition is asking of you. DJ is a Harvard senior lecturer. He's a founder of the Sabbatical Project and a brand new book that just came out called Big Time Off, Transformative Power of Sabbaticals and How to Take One. DJ, welcome.
Thanks. Awesome to be here. I'm a double alum, so I've been to Santa Fe and Baja. How many people
A
have
double
been to
alum. If
both?
anybody's been to
Yeah,
Santa Fe and Baja, pop it in. Now, when did this book officially,
just
you
the
were
book.
just in Northern California. It just hit the streets, right?
I did. My book baby is a week old. My baby baby is 8 weeks old. So it's been a pretty intense season so far this summer.
We call that in our transitions language a new beginning season that you are in here. I love it. So congratulations on the baby.
Thank you.
child that you have in your family and on this wonderful new book, baby. So let's talk about. I'm sure if you were to have told yourself a decade or so ago that you were going to become an authority on sabbaticals, you would have probably not believed that that would be true. But in fact, you burned out to some degree in a dream job and you took some time off and you walked 900 miles on a pilgrimage across Japan. You moved through a huge time of personal change. You started questioning the success that you had built and discovered during this time that the space that you created was more important than you realized. So I'd love to jump in and have you just take us to the beginning, where many of us might still be deeply embedded in the world that is this big all the way around us. And
Mhm.
how did you get from that place to even conceiving of this idea of time off?
Yeah, I mean, and I'll go back to the beginning, which is how I start my book, which is I was always afraid of kind of having a midlife crisis. I was always afraid of going down the wrong path. And so I felt like I had inoculated myself from that by, starting my dream company. It was like a FICO score for emerging markets. So we helped people in emerging markets like Nigeria, Indonesia get access to credit. Had all the kind of marquee successes and, had a great company and great people. And, I just started to feel like it wasn't fulfilling anymore. And I think when you burn out from your dream job, I don't know if that resonates with y'all, if you have this kind of life that you think you designed to love and is no longer fulfilling, that's pretty unsettling. And so I kind of had this like burnout feeling where I felt like I was not able to show up to work and in my life the way I wanted to. But then I also had this kind of pull towards experiencing something different in my life and doing different things with my life that the kind of, you know, American vacation package wouldn't address. So not that everyone needs to go on a 900-mile walk, but even if you want to go walk a week of the Camino, or if you want to fly to Japan or New Zealand, you're already kind of using up all of your vacation days. And so I think I felt a little bit pushed out of my life and then also like pulled towards some things that I felt were important but rarely urgent. I think the urgent kind of rules my life, rules our life. And so I wanted to make some more space for what I felt like was important.
I want to dig into something you said that I think is important that you were recognizing in that inner pull that you wanted a little distance from the public version of success to find something more authentic. How did that start to show itself to you? How did that erupt inside of you, or was it a quiet awakening that just gradually revealed itself?
I think that I was finding myself I know Elizabeth Gilbert said this. I'm not sure if she was at MEA when she did, but she talked about kind of following your curiosities as opposed to following your passions. Like following your passion is intimidating, but following your curiosity feels lower stakes. And I was finding myself drawn back to philosophy, which I had studied in college. And, not to be ageist, but I feel like I didn't have enough, life in the grist mill at that point to really
Yes.
understand the philosophies that I had been studying. And so having had a little bit more under my belt, trying to think about how to live a good life and what spiritual practices I wanted to follow, and so it was kind of a bubbling up. And then I think at a certain point, it becomes an idea that you can't avoid. And you're like, okay, it's time to actually go follow my scent here.
Mm. All right, so let's go there. Let's follow where your scent was taking you. How in the world did this evolve that you had these dimensions of walking 900 miles across Japan in 6 weeks, and a lot of reflection during that time? How did that come about for you?
I think that, that's certainly a marquee accomplishment on my sabbatical. And that was kind of an anchor that I really wanted to do. I felt like it was, a pilgrimage is a great metaphor for sabbatical. It's a great thing to do on sabbatical because it takes a long time. It gets you out of your head and into your body. And I feel like no matter what you're doing, as long as you follow the recipe of out of your head and into your body and a long time away from routine work, you'll experience a transformation. And so I had gone on the last 100 kilometers of the Camino in Spain. I'm sure a fair amount of folks here have done that or have wanted to do that. And I did it in just a hilariously American fashion where I was like, how much can I pack in 5 days? And then I'll fly there, I'll fly back. And it just felt like I was doing something instead of being something. Um, and so I looked for other pilgrimages. I wanted to get a little bit more off the beaten path and, investigate a little bit more into Buddhism. But so that's like a marquee thing that I did. But really the extra space gave me time to do things that were extraordinarily important to me. Spending time with my mom, who was ill at the time, and being there and kind of cooking her meals and being present after 7, 8 years of traveling and living out of a suitcase. And then getting outdoors. I went to my first meditation retreat. Um, I composed my first song and performed it, in a bar where no one I knew would ever see me. And so it's just these things that I feel like were interesting to me and were hearkening back to the things that I used to love and care for in my life, but weren't getting much service.
And did you find, I think that for a lot of folks, been very attached to the doing thing. Like I mentioned, we go on vacation, we're still doing, we're busy, busy, busy. So that
Hmm.
shift into being, as you had said, sort of long enough time in your body without a routine, something starts to shift. How did that unfold for you internally? The many miles, or did you fight that? Did you find it to be more challenging than you thought, or
Mm.
was it more pleasant than you thought?
No, yeah, definitely not pleasant. I think that I talk about in the book how one of the most surprising things about sabbaticals is that they're difficult. I think most people would assume that because you spend a lot of time away from work, you're having the time of your life, and you probably are. But as with any kind of growth and change, whether it's like physical, bodybuilding, health type stuff, it takes effort, right? And I think when you put aside your identity around who you are at work, I'm sure we all have that experience where one of the first things you say about yourself when you meet someone is what you do. And my experience at MEA is it actually disconnects, it breaks that circuit so that people are actually more curious as to what brought you there or something. But I think in our society, what you do and that identity is the first thing. And so when you give that identity up, then you have to wrestle with like, who actually am I? Apart from these roles and responsibilities I've been playing, what if I don't go back to that? What's the role of money and all that? So the vacuum that those identities leave tends to bring in a lot of difficult things, which you probably needed to deal with, but again, you could kind of stow in a back container while you attended to the things that were on your calendar for next week, as opposed to really, investing in the things that matter.
Mm. And I know when you returned from your traveling time, you extended your sabbatical, you did a
Hmm.
bunch of volunteer work. And so all in all, it was about a year, is that right? That you spent in this sort of liminal space.
Yeah. Yeah, though I will say, so I came back, after 4 months and I decided to leave my company, which I think was not a surprise to my co-founders, but it certainly wasn't something that I felt like I had the courage to do before experimenting with what it was like when I was gone. And I kind of committed to take the rest of the year and donate my time and kind of contemplate the next step. And so part of what I gained on the sabbatical was the conviction that I would be okay. I could always make money doing something at some point, but that kind of giving back a little bit more and giving some more air and space to the change was most important at this point in time. And, through synchronicity and anyone who's had time wealth and kind of like unscheduled time, you tend to see that opportunities come to you. It's kind of magic that happens when we're not so busy. I met a researcher at my alma mater, Notre Dame, where I was volunteering, who studied flourishing and happiness in the workplace. And so that kind of gave me the like legitimacy and the permission to embark on an academic study as a non-academic myself, because I just felt like the experience that I had had and everyone I spoke to who had taken extended leave um, justified some sort of rigorous investigation. Obviously, vacations are great, and a longer vacation would be better, but there was something, very different going on with this amount of time, and the experimentation and embodiment of different identities that happens with a sabbatical.
Love this. I mean, I love that you felt this desire initially yourself. You were doing something you loved, but you had the sort of call to adventure, as they say, the sort of the hero's
Mm,
journey was pulling you. You did this inner work, exploring Buddhism and taking time to walk and to sort of shed these identities. You kind of returned home and then gave back, potentially a more filled cup, and discovered some new opportunities to
mhm.
bring this wisdom to others, which is just such a beautiful, virtuous cycle that you've done. And so let's talk about that you didn't just go back to work. You didn't just start
Mm.
another company. You actually spent some time at our MEA campus during sabbatical sessions, and you were working on this whole concept of how to deepen research around this with the Sabbatical Project. So let's talk about what you've learned and how can we be gaining some insights when we think about peak life events or times in our life that we might want to be more proactive in thinking about a sabbatical or extended time away.
I mean, one of the first things we learned, you mentioned peak life events, which I'm not sure that folks fully understand. It's like a research terminology that means exactly what you might expect. But the way that people were talking about the experiences on their sabbatical, the lessons that they learned, the way in which those memories informed the rest of their life are up there on par with the birth of one's child, their wedding day, the death of a loved one. And so I wasn't having, a unique experience. It actually was happening to everyone in our study. Um, and the mechanism through which that was happening was, you're actually able to have enough time to detox, so to pull yourself out of what we call functional workaholism. Like we hear a lot about burnout, and I think of burnout as more of like a end state. Functional workaholism is kind of the water that we're all swimming in. And so when you step away from it long enough, you actually see I was actually not healthy, or I did not have a good relationship with my family while I was working, or I wasn't kind of firing on all neurons. And I needed to see that and be given perspective. Um, a sabbatical alum recently described it as like a near-death experience where you're like zooming up and you're able to see your life to date, see what you're doing now, and try to imagine a different life going forward. That I think when we're just kind of socked in, one step after another in routine work, it's hard to see. Um, so there's that healing aspect where we're actually away long enough and out of our heads and out of the routine long enough that we can heal physically and mentally. Then there's this experimentation kind of segment, which is you have enough time to actually try on different identities. So you hear people that wanted to write a book, you hear people that wanted to get certified like yoga or scuba, people that wanted to, someone in my study wanted to run an eco lodge when they retired. And instead of waiting and dreaming their entire life, they're like, actually, I think I'm going to go kind of intern at some eco lodges and see what it's like, which informed them that they definitely did not want to do that. And so,
Perfect.
living this like counterfactual out to say like writing a book sounds great, and then you do it for 3 months and it either is great or it's not so great. But I could talk about sabbaticals as regret insurance because you can try something on, and if you don't like it, it's almost as good as knowing that you do like it, as far as living a life without regret. And then, the third phase in sabbaticals is people are integrating these learnings that are not just kind of intellectual learnings, but actually lived experience. Like the Aristotelian concept of metis, the knowledge of being a sailor you can't get from reading a book about sailing, right? And so you're actually trying on different versions of yourself to better inform how you would like to change going forward. Or if you'd like to just set more discrete boundaries around work and life and return in a similar way, but with different objectives. Um, I think about the reason I got connected to MEA is because Chip he took a sabbatical after his, near-death experiences, and that's what brought him to Airbnb that has a sabbatical policy. And so, for him to be able to like experiment with different ways of living to capture joy by going to, I think he went to like 100 festivals in a year or something. That's the kind of stuff we see, and that's the stuff that is just not possible with the allotted vacation that we all have.
Right, for sure. We're getting questions already coming in about finances. Yeah, we're going to get there, everybody, for sure. So, yes. So I do want to talk about you say, don't wait for something to break. And I love that. That has anybody here ever experienced any sort of work burnout or functional work, what do you call it? Functional workaholism? Yeah, anybody out there? I'm seeing a few confessions. We're kind of wired to function that way, sort of a badge of honor to go, 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 to manage burnout, not even realize that the first thing you do when you wake up is check the phone, the meetings, get on the
Mm,
emails, right? Go, go, go. Then you're so tired. You eat whatever, watch Netflix, repeat. Becomes a challenging. Is my video breaking up? I'm not sure. I see myself just fine. So who knows? In the Wi-Fi Zoom gods, hopefully it will sort itself out. So as we are all approaching things from different perspectives, I love this idea of don't wait for something to break.
mhm.
And that you said there's kind of an archetype of a sabbatical taker, someone who decides to begin this adventure. Can you describe those three for us?
Yeah, and someone just mentioned in the chat Arthur Brooks' Strivers. So Arthur Brooks blurbed my book, and he's also number one on my list to get to take a sabbatical because he's one of those folks that like I
Yes.
definitely should do it, but I don't have time. And so the achiever archetype kind of in my parlance fits into that, which is
Yeah.
you swap out your productivity mindset at work and you pull in kind of personal things that you'd like to accomplish. So again, always wanted to write that book, or what would it be like to help a friend with a startup idea, or I would like to be fluent in that language. For me, it was remodeling my own kitchen. I've got these like Microsoft Excel fingers, like I'm not a tool swinger, and it really felt empowering for me to do that. Don't get too close up on the kitchen tile job, but like and so that doesn't sound fun to most people, but it was intrinsically motivated. And
Yeah.
so instead of doing a job that someone else wants you to do, you're actually choosing the job that you do. And so for achievers, I caution them to make sure that they are making sure to heal at the beginning instead of just running on adrenaline straight into some other task. Um, but that we found in our research, people think that you have to be totally on vacation, sipping a coconut on the beach in order to recover. But we actually found this kind of like active rest can fulfill that as well. The second archetype is the explorer. So you imagine kind of like a prototypical gap year person. Like I want to see the world. I want to strap on a backpack, and this obviously can happen at all points in our life. Um, they don't have any real ends or purpose. They just kind of want to see what's out there in the world. And I think those folks can often miss the magic nearby. So one of the stories in my book, Carrie, a Bay Area person who had relocated there for work, really took her sabbatical to volunteer in the community, work in a public garden, work in a boat club, boathouse under the Golden Gate Bridge. And like, so she was exploring within her own community in order to feel like it was truly an adopted home as opposed to just a waypoint. And I think a lot of explorers can miss something because they think they have to go, to some exotic place. I'd planned on going to see Rumi, the mystic poet's birthplace. There was a festival, and I was in Turkey for work. And the guy at FICO was like, you know that one of the biggest Sufi retreat centers is like an hour and a half from Boston, right? And so I think I think oftentimes we
The
can miss
alchemist
those things.
journey, right?
Yeah.
Coming out to return home.
Yeah. And so, and then the third archetype is the seeker. And so instead of exploring outwards, think about it as exploring inwards, like an archaeologist around what's important to you, what you used to care about, what, hobbies you want to pick back up. For me, it was music. Um, and, I think those folks, the challenge is you can be so focused on your own personal growth and development that you forget to be in community with others and serve others, which obviously brings a lot of joy and meaning. So those are the reason I talk about those is so that folks can recognize a little bit of themselves in those archetypes and try to avoid some of the mistakes that I've seen people do.
Yeah. Love this. And so some of you might be recognizing yourself in any of those. I'd love to have you pop in the chat. Which one do you think you are? Are you an explorer? Do you think you're an achiever? Do you think you're a seeker? Let's see who we have here today. My husband is definitely an achiever type, and I'm a bit more of a seeker type. So, um, I love this. So let's see who we've got here. We've got some seekers and explorers and a blend. Nice. So you're recognizing already some of this in you. So I want to overlay that. Extreme striver in the
Hmm.
beginning, right, messy middle. All right, nice.
Has to strive even to be the most
I'm the
striviest.
most
Yeah.
striver of all the striver achievers, period. Love this. Okay, this is fun. So we have this, so the kind of who we are intrinsically or how we approach these moments in our life. Now, let's look at the transitions of life that may
Mhm.
provoke this. That this is my area of expertise, transitional intelligence, TQ, in midlife, which is now 35 to 75. There are more transitions than any other time. They're hitting us professionally, they're hitting us personally with our health, they're hitting us in our relationships, whether it's kids or no kids, or married or divorced, or empty nesting, it's aging parents and sandwich generation work. It's moving to a new place. It's what is our sense of purpose. It's grief and loss. There's many areas. So I'd love to have you kind of overlay. Is there a time when we may have this inner achiever or seeker awakening in us that overlays with a transition or time of life that's optimal or common to see sabbatical starting to show up for folks?
One of the reasons I got into this work was, recognize that in my life there was no inflection point to celebrate. Like there was no reason I would take time off, but for having some sort of crisis, right? A health crisis, a relationship crisis, a job crisis. And, obviously I heard about Chip's work in that space. And one of the goals of the book is to help people get permission to use these inflection points in life as like scheduled maintenance, as opposed to going until you have to pull the parachute. In the book, I talk about anywhere from like gap year to kind of twilight career, using these inflection points like empty nesting and contemplating retirement to actually step back and run experiments, as opposed to just putting all of your kind of hopes and dreams towards retirement. As we've all seen, I'm sure, some people don't make it there in the state that they'd like to. Finances change. It's a risky bet to do that. The thing I like about MEA and from my experiences there is that uh, it can serve as a positive catalyst to say, all right, I've done some thinking, I did a retreat, and actually this is something that I want for my life. I'm going to plan for it, as opposed to waiting until some crisis snatches you out of everyday life and you feel obligated to kind of blow your life up, right? Which was my story. And I think if that's the case, then it's more expensive, it's more traumatic, it takes longer. So we all kind of want to just be given a little bit of permission and inspiration from folks that have been there before, so that we don't have to kind of relearn a lesson that many other people have.
Yeah. So let's talk about, like, most of us folks are like, DJ, dude, like I have to pay my bills and
Mhm.
I cannot take time off. I can't afford that. I don't know how I would get my company to support that. It's, it is something that everyone should have. And those friends of ours who live in Europe who are about to start their August vacation
Hmm.
Americans, I always sort of peer at the glass of looking at my European friends who get to be off for the whole month of August. But certainly for Americans, we don't really, we don't covet time off at all. As a matter of fact, true story, I hit a major burnout last year myself and
Mm.
discovered that I had almost 300 hours of vacation time that I hadn't taken over the
Hmm.
years. Like, no wonder. There you go. And that was an insidious thing. There's just,
Hmm.
you work all the time, you work on weekends, you work when you're on vacation. So I think that you've a very practical answer for this. You are not subscribing that this concept of sabbaticals is only for the elite who happen to sell their own business, who can create this life, but it's for anybody and may require a little bit of planning. So let's talk a little bit about that. How can this be accessible in a culture that doesn't value it or doesn't often provide the stipend or time to support it?
Mm. So many things I want to respond to there. I think first of all, one of the things I found in writing this book and doing the research is that there actually are a lot of examples of high performing companies, individuals, countries that make sabbaticals just part of the norm. And so I think part of the story is telling those stories as opposed to just having, oh, Elon Musk's like sleeps under his desk and runs three companies at the same time. Steve Jobs studied calligraphy in his forced sabbatical. Mark Benioff was on sabbatical from Oracle when came up with the idea for Salesforce. The guy that started Impossible Foods was on sabbatical and said he wanted to be engaged in climate work, right? So it actually does exist. It's just a matter of telling that story. The first thing that I think folks should think about is, of course, almost no one can afford to take a sabbatical tomorrow, right? I think, as burnt out as we might be, we need to set the calendar to like 2030, 2031, and say, okay, what are we doing in 2031? Let's save up money. Let's talk to our bosses and say, I want to stay at this company, and it's important to me to have a summer off with my family before my kids leave for college or whatnot in 4 years. Let's plan around that. Like I'm committed, I'm loyal. And so I think we have to rethink our planning, our long-term planning around this. And then also, bringing some of the case studies and evidence that I bring forth in the book to say you're coming back rejuvenated, you're coming back more creative, you are more kind of loyal to the company. But this kind of financial affordability is very real. Like it is a privilege for people who don't work for a company that have a policy. Um, And so part of the goal of this book is to start a movement around if people that can make policies, if people in leadership positions can take sabbaticals and make it more equitable to folks inside the organizations, great. Um, I think this is how the paid parental leave movement kind of started in the States, where we are still the only OECD country that doesn't have federal mandated paid parental leave, but we've come a long way. And I think 40 states offer it now. California was the first in 2002. And so, similar to the fact that it's a bit of a head scratcher when you apply to a company that doesn't have paid parental leave, we're trying to kind of demonstrate that this is a reasonable, movement of how we work. And, the weekend is 100 years old. It's a relatively recent invention. And, COVID, the silver lining showed us that we actually can work in very different ways than we thought before. We had the technology to do that. We just needed kind of a forcing function. And so I think, especially in this age of AI, when things are changing so quickly, we'll either have a chance to recoup some of our time because AI and agents and that sort of thing can be productive for us, or we'll be just reinvesting that time into more productivity instead of taking some for leisure. And I think Pat, his comment and Carrie, yours resonate because the U.S. high income earners in the U.S. leave more paid vacation days on the table than any other group in the U.S. and abroad. So it's an unfortunate American tradition that I think is evolving with the younger generations, but not fast enough.
Yeah, agreed. I love learning from some of the younger generations who are recognizing the importance of work-life balance. Okay, so y'all, everybody who's here, I'm curious if you have ever taken a sabbatical. Raise your hand or put a yes or something into the chat. Andrea was waving at me. She has done a sabbatical before. Christopher has done a sabbatical before. Victor, not yet. Okay, and Juan, you're about to go on one. I saw that, and Japan is part of it, a 2-month sabbatical next summer.
Nice.
Amy has done 2 from work. That's amazing. I have a couple saying not yet. No. So, and Tanya says yes, it's been a while. So this is audience participation time. So I would love to hear, oh, Velda is starting one in September. So exciting. So I'd love to hear from those of you who've taken a sabbatical. Maybe you could share with us some of your reflections and with DJ, some of your insights from having taken one. Those of you who are getting ready to, if you have questions, if you are still like, oh my God, how am I even going to figure this out? Love that too. So the way to do that, all of you, is to raise your hands. The easiest way for me to find you in that react button that we pushed. You also can go ahead and fire off another emoji if you like them, if you want to. Um, so I'd love to hear who wants to jump in. Maybe someone who has done a sabbatical or is about to do one. Any questions that you might have? I do see that Pat, you're saying that you had a sabbatical after you got laid off, so it wasn't planned, but you got some clarity out of that. So love to maybe have you come up and tell us about that in a moment if you like. I'm going to bring Christopher up here first. Hey, Christopher, thanks for being the first to raise your hand. Come on up.
Hey, Carrie, I
Hey.
appreciate it. Yeah, I was working in the U.S. government, in the diplomacy, and I was kind of trying to figure out if I wanted to stay in it. And at the same time, my daughter was a senior in high school, and I said, well, she's never going to be a senior in high school again. And I
Hmm.
wasn't really happy with the particular project I was working on at the time, and so I wanted to kind of take a few months and enjoy that period with her, and then come back and get another assignment and sort of reset. And as it turned out, I wound up leaving the government about 2 years later, but I think that really helped me kind of find the courage to make that move a couple years later.
I'd love to pick up on that. So it sounds like it is sort of a tiered effect. Maybe DJ, you can talk about that, that you had said the same, that when you came back, you had the courage to leave your job. So is there
Hmm.
some component of these sabbaticals where there's some unresolved decision that's sort of simmering underneath? And maybe Christopher, if you have more to share about that, I'd love to hear that because I think that's really fascinating.
Yeah, for me it was. I mean, I already had kind of there were some personal things that had gone on that were kind of changing the way I thought about my career, and so this, putting my family first in that particular time, um, again, it kind of made me. It was kind of a reminder that there's a lot more to life than the career I was in at the time.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
one of the things that, thanks for sharing, Christopher. One of the things that we heard over and over again is feeling more human again, which is kind of like a woo thing to say, right? Like no one that I know of says like I want to go on sabbatical because I need to feel more human, but it makes total sense. It's these things like not missing that summer with your kid. I mean, you can, as you saw, you can never get that back, right? I talked to a lawyer at a firm here in Boston, and he wanted to do the same thing, and he was like, but if as soon as I make partner or as soon as I get to this, then I'll do it. And you can't take those moments back, right? So what we found is that about 2/3 of sabbaticals, happen to you, right? Job crisis, relationship crisis, that sort of thing. I think as Pat was saying. And so the question is, can you actually make space during that moment to breathe a little bit, so that you're not grocery shopping while hungry, right? You're not going immediately to the next thing, which looks maybe exactly like the thing you were doing before, and at least giving yourself a beat to say, is there something else I'd like to explore before the next leg of my journey? Um, Christopher, another thing is that there was a woman in my study from who worked at the U.S. Treasury, and so they have this leave without pay,
That's what I did. Yeah,
program.
leave without
Great.
pay.
Yeah, and so to the earlier question above, I'm not sure if you retain health insurance there, but again, if you're planning 4 or 5 years in advance, it's expensive to go on Cobra or whatever you need to do. Um, but you kind of put it in your budget and you say, like, this is important to me. Because we're all saving for retirement, right? And so making the bet that you will for sure get to do all the stuff you want to do in retirement versus sprinkling it in little bits over the course of your life.
Mm, so good. Okay, I love this. So this was Christopher, you made this decision to create this sabbatical. Um, and Pat, I'm just going to check. Do you want to, will you come up for a second and tell us about yours? And then I'll grab to you, Annika, that you had the opposite. So you didn't get to plan this. This was involuntary. This came at you.
Mhm.
So how did you work through it in a way that might be a little bit different from what Christopher did?
Yeah, so I was working in technology, and you don't need to know what I was doing, but anyway, I got laid off, and when I got laid off, it was like it devastated me because I really, really thought I was going to be in this job, good, easy paying, great vacation, blah blah blah. And when I got laid off, I was totally devastated. And a friend of mine recommended that age-old book, Transitions by William Bridges.
Ooh,
Yep.
And
I think
I
it's
took
behind me somewhere.
time. Yeah, it should be on everybody's shelf if it's not. So I took the time, and I started looking for the same work, and I'm like, what the hell am I doing? I said I really didn't like it. I couldn't keep up with the technology, nor was I interested in any longer. So I actually took a look at my finances as DJ suggested, and I went, I'm good for 6 months. I can hang in here for 6 months and take that space, take that grace to really take a look at what I really wanted to do, and that is basically how I ended up starting my own business in the field of leadership coaching. And after 20 years, here I am. And as traumatic as it was at that point in time, I am so grateful to that organization for laying me off. Otherwise, I would not have been here with Kari and DJ at
Yeah.
MEA talking about it. So,
Yes.
yeah, really
That's
great.
a
And thank you, DJ. Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another forced sabbatical, right? Like I think another classic that many of you might have read is The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck. And he talks about how like we're afraid of pain, right? And leaving something introduces uncertainty, it will be painful, and so we delay it, and in so doing, the total amount of pain we experience is greater.
That's right.
And so, to your point earlier, I think that oftentimes I assume we have this intuition that we should leave, and the sabbatical is kind of like a baby step towards letting that breathe. But it's really hard to listen to those deep feelings when we're just swamped at work and putting one foot in front of the other. So I don't think everyone, like, not everyone leaves. We actually found that 80% of people return back to their jobs if they're given a sabbatical policy. But 100% of the people who have to leave to take a sabbatical leave, right? And so
Yeah,
that's the
right.
comparison set that companies
I
are
love,
facing.
Pat, that you've been able to come 360 20 years later and find gratitude that these disruptive moments of our lives can be some of the most transformative, and they force us to see what we're made of and give us this opportunity to be something we may never have imagined. So thank you for being brave. Let me just pull you up here. Um, Annika, come on up.
Yeah, hi, thanks. Well, it's funny listening to you because I'm a professor, so I'm fortunate enough to get sabbatical every 7 years or so. But I went into, though I've had one, I went into blown achiever and mega striver, I think somebody called it. And I just worked a whole bunch and like checked off a bunch of things on the list. So I'm regretting that approach after listening to you, and I will do it differently next time, which is great. So thanks for your input. I am curious if you have thoughts on like kind of a micro sabbatical concept of like if you can't wait for 7 years to get a semester, or if somebody can't afford it or whatever, like ways to do this on a smaller scale. And what have you learned about the principles of a full sabbatical could be applied to something that's shorter, cheaper?
Great
Yeah.
question.
The first thing I'll say is that to give you credit, I'm not an academic. I don't qualify for sabbaticals, but also academic sabbaticals are tough because you have kind of three jobs, and on sabbatical you're allowed to put down two of them, but you still have to do the research job. And so when I looked at the history of the term sabbatical, the first one was here at Harvard, and the exact quote from the minutes and the meaning was it was for rest, recovery, and the pursuit of further studies. And of course, like that rest and recovery thing is now gone from the definition. And ironically, it was long enough. They tested out smaller amounts of time and they decided it needed to be a full year, if not a full semester, precisely because European institutions took the summer off. And so, like, we need to exchange information with our European colleagues, and they take the summer very seriously, which I thought was funny. Um, but yeah, you're not going to like my answer here, which is every person who's taken a sabbatical has taken a vacation, and they're saying that something is profoundly different. And, part of the mechanism behind that is that you are away from work long enough that it has to get done without you. So work isn't piling up in the background and you're just thinking about it. You have enough time and time wealth to actually experiment and heal and do these things which you can't do, on an app or 15 minutes or a weekend. Um, that being said, I think there are conditions to which you don't have to take a year off to get some of the benefits. Um, the kind of best practices of a sabbatical, like duration, long enough, like disconnection. Can you practice with being fully disconnected? If that's a tech Sabbath, can you practice with getting out of your head and into your body? And that will actually, whether it's ceramics, so like tactile, or yoga, or being in the wilderness, so that you're kind of forcing this disconnection and pulling it forward. Um, and try to do things that are less achievery, right? Like put away the nonfiction reading and read fiction. Read something that kind of it has no purpose, right? We talk in the first chapter about identity play. So like playing your way and with purposeless activity into a realization. And I think MEA and MEA's programs do a great job of that. Um, and I think the minimum amount of time should be more in months than weeks or days. But imagine taking as you do in some forms, like a summer vacation. So take the pressure off of like, taking one's kids out for 6 months or months and months off and just say, I want to take summer off in 3 years and I'm gonna plan for that. Um, and then I think once you have that experience, then you can more easily pull back the lessons to integrate it into smaller batches in your life. Um, it's not a popular opinion, but the reason I've spent so much time kind of dedicated to this is it's not easy. It's not easy to do. It's not easy to make time for, but it seems to produce these results that are outstanding. And so it's a little bit of a recipe, but I think you can shortcut your way there. The last thing I would say is that if you wait until there's an emergency and you have to heal and you're pulling the ripcord, it takes a lot longer to get to that space. So if we live in a world where your employer says every 4 years you take 6 weeks off, we'll cover you, it's paid, you don't have to worry about the finances, it's a different animal.
Yeah. Thank you. That was an excellent question. Appreciate you. Oh, goodness, look who's here. Jim Flaherty. Hello, friend. How are you, my many time MEA alum and senior modern elder? Good to have you.
Hi, Terry. Thank you, DJ. I have also, besides the obvious financial need, there's a certain time in your life when you have too many obligations to say, oh, I'm going to take a sabbatical. I happen to have a wife and children, and life has to go on. And so you say, no, there is no sabbatical. I think then also the need for sabbatical is stronger amongst people who have been forced either by family pressure or because of the history of the family into a profession that they don't really like. I know a lot of people that were big deals in finance because they had to go into finance or they
Mhm.
had to become lawyers, they had to become doctors, and they never really liked it. I, on the other hand, was able to do something I loved from the beginning, even though I was poor as poor can be starting out because I liked it. I wasn't poor after a while. I did all right with it. And I embraced a quote from Noel Coward that I still is one of my favorite mantras of all time. And it's very true. I tell when I'm lecturing high school seniors or college students, I always tell them this. work is more fun than fun. And it is. If you're doing something you like, work is more fun than fun. I would think, no, I can't do it. There's also another kind of sabbatical you don't want to take, which I had one, a forced sabbatical to take care of somebody. I was a caregiver for dementia for 3.5 years. And
Mm.
didn't exist. I left the world because that's all you do when you're really caregiving 24/7.
Mhm.
That's not, it's a terrible kind of sabbatical. And the other belief I have about a sabbatical is that for it really to be good, I think you have to leave home. You've got to
Mm.
go someplace else. Being at home, there's too much. Even if you have people to do for you, there's too much to do when you're at home. I had a one month at MEA in Baja, and it was wonderful. Was it total turn off? No, I finished a screenplay while I was there because I had a month of being in a perfect setting. But it was still, for me, it was a sabbatical. Anyway,
Mm.
thank you very much.
I love that, Jim. I'm going to capture a couple things and turn it into a question. DJ, do you have to take a sabbatical if you hate your job? If you love your job and you love your work, can you still successfully have a sabbatical and come back?
Yeah.
So let's grab that
Yeah.
because Jim was sort of posing, I don't need one because I love my job. So let's grab that. And I definitely want to recognize the caregivers of this world.
Yeah.
That often is a forced time off, but it is time of service. So let's just grab those two kind of polarities and get your thoughts.
Um, I really appreciate it, Jim, and I'm not sure if creative work is your line of work, but I was just in LA and it struck me that, part of the creative process that's natural to folks in that sphere is you work on a project, you get inspiration. You work, you get inspiration. Sometimes it's forced, sometimes it's purposeful. And I think the cadence of the business world is like you graduate from high school or college and then you work until retirement, which is just not sustainable, right? And it doesn't allow
No.
that time for
Right.
reflection and things like that. So I think we have a lot to learn from that creative industry. As far as um, you know, wanting to take and needing to take time off, I think of Michael Pollan, his notion of psychedelics as like for the betterment of well people. So are we doing it to solve a problem, or are we doing it to experience the greater spectrum of the human experience, right? I think,
Okay.
you know, any and all of our work, I think, can be improved um, by stepping away, even if it's to realize like, man, I tried something else and I just really love my work. Like that's a great realization.
Hmm.
And on the caregiving piece, one of the protagonists in my book took leave from his consulting job to take care of his father as he passed away, and so we got to be there in the last 3 months of his life. And I think that's not the point of the story that I tell, but his brother was working his ass off as a lawyer. And so caregiving was obviously extraordinarily difficult and not a walk in the park. But he got to be there for his father in his last
Hmm.
months, and his brother did not. And
Hmm.
so, I think it's some of these like human experiences that we're just trying to create a little space for so that it feels more natural. It doesn't feel like an exception from the rule to do something like caregiving. So yeah, I love what you're saying.
Beautiful. Thank you,
Thank you.
Jim.
Thank you.
Beautiful. So I'd love to kind of wrap this all up with a bow. So everybody, you're definitely going to want to buy DJ's book. The team will pop it again into the chat. And, maybe some takeaway thoughts here that you may want to kind of wrap us up with for those who are, I know, Juan, you said you're about to go on your sabbatical. So any kind of words of advice as adventurers are beginning to plan and head out?
It's a good question. I think, the one concrete advice I give in my book, because I- I'm kind of the belief that if you're gonna fail, if you're gonna like learn something about yourself, you should kind of see yourself do it. And I think a sabbatical is a recipe that you kind of can't mess up. But as long as you kind of take those scaffolding and preconditions I talked about with duration and disconnection, is I give this recommendation of keeping a journal. And I think people that don't keep journals hate the concept of being told to keep a journal, just like people that don't meditate hate the concept of being told to meditate. But I do think that the journaling is a great way to capture your mind, your frame of mind before you take a sabbatical, and really kind of interrogate yourself with, I encourage my students, when you apply to grad school or college, you have to do this essay around what do you want the next 5 years to look like? What are your three biggest mistakes? Yada, yada, yada. We don't really have to apply to our life anymore in the future. And so can you take that journal and say, like, how am I doing? What do I want to be doing? What would I regret not doing while I'm still here on this earth? And then over the course of your sabbatical, just keeping a bit of a log so that you can see by the end how to integrate those different versions of yourself that popped up. And the other thing I would encourage people to do, even if you're kind of saying this is not possible for me, or I'm not interested, or I can't imagine doing it, take that journal and go to a cafe and just try to make it real for you. It's not a sabbatical. It's accomplishing something that you've always wanted to do with your life. It's being there for your kid or your grandkid during a milestone. It's, finally setting out and trying to write that book or try something that you've wanted to do. And I think by writing it down and willing it to the front of your mind, it's a seed that will be planted and grow. And then we can talk in 2031. But I'm happy to be helpful. And if it makes sense to come down to MEA to help people kind of kick off their sabbaticals, I'm happy to do that as well. So be in touch.
I love that. So that'll be our last takeaway, Simon, everybody, is can you think of something that you've always wanted to do? If I could wave a magic wand right now and give you all 3 months to have a sabbatical, you didn't have to take care of anybody, what would you want to do? So pop it in the chat. Would you want to learn improv? Would you want to become a poet? Would you want to explore history? What would you want to do? Tell me. And I find this is a really interesting core inquiry at MEA, is that often the things that we loved to do when we were kids are still things we would love to do in midlife, whether we were adventure kids and dirty all the time, or we were the creative kids doing paper mache and painting, or we're the social kids. Love that. So that is a great takeaway of thinking about getting a pilot's license, being a novelist, being a travel writer, writing poetry, tree bathing. Love this. Educate people about dog ethology, exploring Europe. Yes. So that's why we are here. Whether we take those trips now or we just think about them, creating this kind of a space to explore these topics makes my entire day. Thank you, DJ. I know you have had so much going on, launching the book and the baby, to make the time to be here with us today. We're so grateful. And this recording will be available. You guys will get this as an email, or you can find it in the free wisdom section on our website, as well as other goodies. So with that, I will bid you farewell, everyone. And thank you again so much, DJ. It was a pleasure.
Great to meet Danielle.
Thank you, everybody. You can take yourself off mute and say goodbye to each other if you like.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Again.
Bye-bye, everybody. Have a good night.